Hi, Easy here. Welcome to the build showcase for Blade Blast. We're using Blade Blast along with Blade Fall as our main skills, and I am fully aware that Math will just put up a video that shows this combo, but hopefully you guys can see that there's multiple ways to build this character and multiple things to take into consideration when you start thinking about how to scale it and how to increase your survivability and increase your damage through means that we have available. So I'm going to be running a tier 13 map to showcase. It's very similar in playstyle to, well, the same build essentially. No matter how you build this character, this playstyle, they're all going to feel somewhat the same. It's just the damage profile will be vastly different. Because both Blade Fall and Blade Blast are physical spells, you can do a lot of cool things with it, such as converting everything to lightning, converting everything to cold, converting everything through lightning, then cold, then fire, then to chaos, which is something that's been abused in past leagues, but that interaction has been nerfed quite heavily due to the changes to the crafted mods. You can't get as much of the non-chaos damage as chaos modifiers as readily, so that outside of something like Eternity Shroud, so that part is safe to ignore. But I believe Matho ran with an Inquisitor that has 100% damage converted to elemental damage, 50% cold, 50% lightning through Fizz to lightning, and then he had a lot of okay. Yeah, as you can tell, Delirium is still yikes. I had Steel Skin up. I'm just not paying attention. Yeah, Fizz, 50% to lightning, 50% to cold, and then 100% elemental damage. If he crits, he ignores all the elemental resistances, which is really good with the Inquisitor, as well as having a lot of defensive bonuses from the Pious Path with Consecrated Ground. So that is definitely a strong option. You can also scale that kind of build by getting extra physical to elemental damage from something like rings, amulets, Watcher's Eyes. Yeah, there's multiple ways to scale that. I chose a different route and went with 100% Fizz. We're not actually converting anything. We are taking benefit of, Fizz is extra chaos and Fizz is extra cold damage, but outside of those small benefits, we aren't actually focusing on anything related to conversion outside outside of crit chance. So what we're running is an Occultist. We have 9 power charges, and we have 2 void batteries. You don't need the void batteries. They're definitely an endgame option. Okay. And as you can see, single target damage is very respectable. Clear is very respectable. Survivability is questionable as per usual. It's not a build showcase unless I die at least once or twice, right? But yeah, like the interaction between Bladefall and Blade Blast is actually quite fun. It's very satisfying, and once you start investing into area of effects, you can get some really good coverage on clears, and with Conk effect on your Bladefall, you can get some serious damage output on single target as well. Blade Blast is actually quite ridiculous in terms of damage, especially if you can stack all of your blades on top of the enemy, which isn't a feasible solution. That's not going to happen very often unless you're cheesing. So I'll go over the other 2 blade skills outside of Bladefall that interacts with Blade Vortex, and I'll go to Blood Aqueducts real quick. So you have Bladefall, you have Blade Vortex, and you have Ethereal Knives. Blade Vortex is a little bit different from the other 2, so I'll cover Bladefall and Ethereal Knives first. So they got new the gems got changed a little bit. It now has lingering blades as part of its skill description, and lingering blades are these little blades on the ground that you can see whenever you use these skills. And for something like Blade Fall, every single volley leaves behind a lingering blade. For Ethereal Knives, every third projectile leaves a lingering blade. So what this means is that every time you use these skills, you're gonna have 3 to 5 lingering blades on the ground depending on the one that you use on baseline. They also have another line where it says 50% fewer lingering blades if you don't cast this skill yourself. So I really like this design where they're encouraging self-casting by making the interaction between Blade Blast and these blade skills more rewarding, rather than just slapping it on to cast on crit and blowing everything up through that method, such as Ice Nova. But there's still a big difference between these two, mainly due to the fact that Bladefall is AoE and Ethereal Knives is projectile based. And not only that, the amount of blades that gets produced between these two is pretty incomparable. When it comes to the Ethereal Knives, you get three. Every third blade produces a lingering blade, and you get 10 projectiles, 1 baseline and then 9 additional projectiles. So every time you cast this, you get 3 lingering blades. With something like Unleash, you get 12 total on the ground, and for some reason you can't see it here. Let me go to the hideout. What? Okay, I can't. Yeah, there you go. So as you can see on the ground, there's a lot of blades on the ground. But the problem with this Ethereal Knives is that, look at the spread. Spread isn't an arc, and you can condense this arc, the spread, using slow projectiles, slower proj, but that doesn't change the fact that these blades land at a fixed distance no matter where you are. Whereas Bladefall, you can target exactly where you want it to be, and majority of the blades are going to land exactly where you point it. So when it comes to using Ethereal Knives, it's significantly worse when you're trying to combo it with Blade Blast. Now, Ethereal Knives in itself feels much better because it has lower cast time, and it is a projectile, so it tends to feel better when you're mapping. But when it comes to single target damage, it falls off heavily, and the fact that your blades get spread out so much means that you're not going to be able to get as many blades on the actual boss for your Blade Blast to do the damage. There is a notable cheese with Ethereal Knives, however. If you go up to a wall, much like Kinetic Blast from before, and even now, I think, if you go up to a wall and throw out all your knives, as you can see, every single one of your knives lands in like right on top of the wall, meaning you can stack every single one of your Blade Blast on the enemy. And if you've ever checked out PoE for Blade Blast any time recently, you know that the DPS output of Blade Blast is insane if you get to high amounts of blades hit on the enemy. So we're talking like 30-40 blades on top of the enemy. That's millions of DPS without even trying. However, this is obviously not going to work in 99.9% of the situations. I can't even remember what the last boss that stands near a wall long enough for you to stack up your knives and then blast them. So in most situations, you're going to be using Blade Fall because it also has an interaction with Spell Cascade. So I take off Spell Cascade. There's respectable amount of blades. But if I put in Spell Cascade, well, there's now 3 times more blades. And you can see the chain effect goes on for much longer. That's because each instance of the Spell Cascade actually creates their own volleys as well. Meaning we're taking 5 baseline and then using Unleash, which gives us 3 additional casts, so 20. And then we're spreading it across the Spell Cascade. So we're getting pretty much 40 blades every single time. I'm not sure if it's actually 40. It might be less. Maybe maybe there's some interactions that's not fully like I can't count everything. But the combo is definitely more effective than without, and you can see it visually. Here's just Blade Fall. I'll cast a Blade Blast right afterwards. This is Blade Fall by itself. There's 5. If you put on Unleash, wait for 3 stacks. You can see it's considerably longer. And if you put on Spell Cascade, oh, we had Spell Cascade on this entire time. I'm dumb. I took out Conk Effect. Yeah, but as you can see, there's a difference. There's a huge difference in the amount of blades, the lingering blades that gets produced with these combos. So Blade Fall is by far the best choice for self-casting. A special note with Blade Vortex is like they showcase Blade Vortex and Blade Blast interaction quite a bit in the skill gem showcase that they released, the trailer before the leak started, and I gotta say it's pretty underwhelming, mainly because of the interaction. So what happens is Blade Vortex in itself is a skill that you always want to have up at high stacks because you get more damage, more hits, more crit multi depending on the number of stacks you have. What Blade Blast does is it consumes these 10 stacks, and then for every stack that you consume, you get 20% more area of effect. So you can see that each pulse gets larger and larger, and while that in itself is really cool, I like this mechanic of using up our Blade Vortex and then getting a huge AoE for maybe like bursting down bosses. But in practice, the fact that you have to cast your Blade Vortex up to 10 stacks every time to get any effective use out of that more area of effect multiplier, and the fact that you're just gonna straight up deal more damage by keeping up your Blade Vortex than spending it with Blade Blast, it's just anti-synergistic, and you're better off just going a pure Blade Vortex character if you're trying to synergize Blade Blast with Blade Vortex. It doesn't even work on Val Blade Vortex, which I think is a shame, because I think that would have been pretty cool if you used it on a Val Blade Vortex. Suddenly you get 20 stacks, or I don't know, something more interesting than just more area damage or more area of effect. In fact, I think putting on in Blade Blast 20% more area damage per Blade Vortex might be something even cooler, because now you have a huge incentive to use up your Blade Vortex counts for a huge hit at the end. But that interaction doesn't exist, so I really don't recommend Blade Vortex. Blade Vortex feels the best by far because of the fact that it's a duration skill, meaning you can just put it up, put on phasing, and just run through everything, and just with the amount of damage that we have, we can kill almost everything just by running into it. But because we're a Blade Blast focused character, and Blade Vortex is a separate build, Blade Fall is by far the best option in our case. Outside of that, we've forgone, like I mentioned, all conversion. We don't actually convert anything. We're pure fizz. So if you look at our damage distribution, we're like 1800 physical damage and then 772 cold damage. The cold damage comes from hatred and hatred alone, nothing else. We also have zealotry, so just 2 big auras. I just switched to zealotry. I might go back and just run Herald of Ash with Flesh and Stone for a more defensive setup. I'm not too certain yet, because that Flesh and Stone definitely would have saved us in an earlier death. But yeah, we have a lot of power charges. I also haven't anointed my amulet, so this part of the tree is going to change. But we have 2 void batteries, 3 power charges from our passive tree, and Occultist Ascendancy for another power charge. The main reason why I went with Occultist is because of the area of effect. Per power charge, we're getting 45% area of effect. We're getting 50% from Carcass Jack. We can also get more area of effect if we want to in the skill tree. So we have 30% here, and we also have 30% 20% here. We also have another 20% here. So we're by far, like, we can invest into more area effect like right now. But I think I'm at a point where I'm pretty happy with the coverage that we're getting. And any more than this is gonna get reduced effectiveness because of how hard area of effect scaling falls off. So maybe I'll drop Carcass Jack and get a better defensive chest, or even more offensive chest, depending on what I see fit, and maybe change up my passive tree there. But having more area of effect, or a comfortable amount of area of effect, is quite important for this character because of the fact that your blades gets put down in a spread, and you want as many of these blade blast area of effects to overlap. So if we're putting down all of these blades, we want every single one of these circles to hit the enemy. And for larger bosses, this isn't as important because their hitbox is so freaking big. But for smaller bosses, or fast bosses that move around quickly, hitting every single one of these can be quite difficult. So having larger AoE really helps out in smoothing out that damage curve that you have. Because if you don't hit your Blade Blast, you don't do any damage. Our Blade Fall does abysmal damage compared to what our Blade Blast does. So we want to make sure that we can hit all of our Blade Blasts, and part of that strategy is increasing as much of our Blade Blast area of effect as possible, and then decreasing as much of our Blade Fall area of effect as possible. Because if you don't have Conk effect, your blades get spread out in a much wider pattern than if you didn't. So you even saw a blade over here down in the bridge, whereas if you have Conk effect on, the damage spread is much tighter, meaning you can hit your enemy and your single target more consistently. So that's that's kind of like the idea behind the build. We're focusing purely on crit as well with void batteries and this many power charges. So that is our main source of damage output. We're not scaling by conversion, we're scaling by crit. Another thing we're doing is, because we are physical damage, because we are not converting to elemental, we don't actually care about elemental resistance. And another damage type that doesn't really care that much about elemental, that doesn't really care about resistances, is chaos. So I have a chaos cluster jewel, a large one, and we have overwhelming malice. And this is actually a substantial damage increase because of how much physical damage we actually have. So we crit guaranteed every single, like, this is 100% uptime buff, so we gain 30% of physical damage as extra chaos at all times. And in my PoE, it's about a 10% to 15% increase, and that's quite substantial. There's also another notable with the cluster jewel, large chaos cluster jewel, where you can get 10% extra fizz as chaos. And there's also one that explodes on enemies, 10% chance to explode, but because we're occultist and we have profane bloom, we don't really care about that. For my medium, I have a precise commander, but because we have so much crit chance and crit multi already, this isn't actually that strong, so I might drop it and save those 3 skill points for something else. For my small jewels, I'm stacking life as much as possible. These fetal jewels are like 40 chaos. They're well worth it in my opinion because they provide similar amounts of life as discipline and training, and you can get it more readily by putting it into large cluster jewels. Outside of that, I'm also running a militant fate jewel. This one is the Templar Dominus one, and it gives us the inner conviction keystone, and this is basically a replacement for frenzy charges for casters. We can generate frenzy charges, but it's not worth it for us to invest into it because we only get 3 frenzy charges at any given time. We just don't benefit from frenzy charges enough to be going for them. And what this does is make sure that we're still getting the most important part of frenzy charges, which is the more damage multiplier, and putting it on our power charges. So this gives us 27% more spell damage, which is effectively half a link, and it really helped boost my single target damage, especially since it applies to every single one of the Blade Blasts. For the Ascendancy, just Profane Bloom with Malediction, Forbidden Power, and then Void Beacon. This one, it might seem like why would you go for this? We're not doing that much cold, we're not doing that much chaos. We're still doing enough to warrant its use, especially since we also have a Series Promise for more chaos damage. So this is definitely worth it. And Metamorphs, you don't see them as often, but they're still a bitch to deal with if they have high life regen. Yeah, that's definitely just a minor thing. The passive tree is very straightforward, just path for whatever is useful. Things like spell crit, like this Annihilation, is actually not that good because it doesn't provide, it provides like 90% crit chance and 15% crit multi, and that doesn't really give us much when we have 9 power charges. Eventually I'll anoint this overcharge and drop all of these path this way and save us 2 skill points to put somewhere else, such as more life. We have pretty respectable amount of life considering we are on the top side of the tree, so I'm definitely happy with my life pool. I think we can be a little bit more defensive by dropping our auras and running something like Blasphemy, Temporal Chain, and Enfeeble, and I think I may resort to that later down the line, especially considering we don't actually, our damage output is fine. As for my gear, double void batteries, like I mentioned, a carcass jack for our chest piece for more area of effect, and everything else is just life and resistance. We actually need quite a lot of dexterity. I'm actually missing some dexterity. I need like 9 more. I believe 10 more to hit level 21 Blade Blast and Blade Fall. So I am missing a little bit of that. I was also using a staff, which is why I have such a high strength right now. I can definitely drop this and replace Steel Skin with Immortal Call. It's not going to be as good of a defense measure, but we get to save on having to allocate this much strength to our gear. But yeah, our helm is purely resistances and life. Our boots are resistances and life with movement speed. Our belt is resistances and life. Our ring is stats and life with resistance. I have a Assassin's Mark on hit. This isn't mandatory by any means, but it does make mapping feel a lot better, especially on an Occultist, because we get the benefit of Profane Bloom. For our necklace, I have a physical damage leeches life. You can also get chaos damage leeches life. We are running a series flask, a series promise, so we do get chaos leech, but it's not as effective as physical because we don't do as much chaos damage. This one also just has life and a little bit of resistance. And our gloves, I went ahead and got a life and faster casting. The other stats aren't that important outside of like dexterity, but I could have gotten that elsewhere as well, so it's no big deal. But the main reason why I got faster casting is Bladefall has a really high cast time. It's 0.7 seconds. That's one of the highest when it comes to spells, and that's part of the reason why it feels really clunky when you first put it on, because it takes forever to cast. But if we have it with faster casting, it feels slightly better. So if I have this on, it's 0.38 seconds, and if we put it on here, it's 0.32 seconds. And it doesn't seem like that's a big deal, 0.06 seconds, whoop-de-doo, but it does make mapping slightly smoother, so I really like it. You don't need it by any means. And because I'm running wands instead of a staff, I was running staff earlier, but I swapped to void batteries. Our blade fall can't be supported by something like spell echo. I actually had spell echo on my blade fall when I was a 5 link, so that I can cancel out the second part of the spell echo and just use the 80% or 60% more spell or cast speed multiplier, which is really good for the clunkiness, getting rid of that high cast time. But outside of that, the gearing is pretty straightforward, especially for this type of this version of Bladefall and physical spells. You aim for crit, and that's it. You aim for crit. You get crit chance wherever you can. You scale through crit damage and crit multi, and you get a little bit of area of effect, and that's all you really need. You don't need to worry about, do I have 100% conversion? Do I have 100%, am I taking care of the resistances on the enemies with elemental weakness or something like that? Am I addressing everything that I need defensively as well? Because once you start worrying about conversion, you have to invest your gear into conversion, such as Hymn Sorrow. If you have Hymn Sorrow, that's a full gear slot that you're missing, that doesn't have life, that doesn't have resistances outside of like 20 cold res, and it doesn't have any like energy shield or anything like that. It has like 20 evasion. And if you're also worried about extra fizz to extra fire, or fizz to extra cold damage on your rings or your boots or your amulet, then it makes your gear significantly more and more expensive to get all of the resistances that you need. And having a Carcass Jack is a huge source of that area of effect, but that means that you can't run Carcass Jack anymore because you need better gear elsewhere. So there's a lot of push and pull when it comes to the decisions that you have to make when you decide, hey, do I want to go conversion or do I want to go crit? And so part of the reason why I've struggled so much with fleshing out this character, and the only reason why I made a build guide this late, when this character, I've been playing this character for quite a while, I have almost 2 full days on it, is because I was struggling with how I wanted to spread out my character in terms of its damage profile, what kind of defense layers it had, and I think ultimately this is what I'm going to stick with. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I'll see how I can push this build further in the future, but that has been the build video. Yeah, I mean gem links, yeah, it's nothing too crazy, so I won't go too deep into that, but I will be posting an update to this build after I feel like it's ready and fully end game ready and prepared and done with. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this longer discussion. It's a lot easier for me to record, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.